Welcome to Fortyborn, the Limited Lorcana podcast. We're a gaming veteran
and a game designer / developer.
Explore all things Lorcana. With a focus on limited formats, we cover set reviews, strategy guides, and stuff that nobody asked for.
Let's answer some of those things.
Let's do it. So once again, Taylor is out this week. I'm sorry he could not make it. He was caught smuggling exotic pufferfish out of Cambodia. And as is his second offense, he has to, spend a little time away. So our thoughts and prayers are with you, Taylor. We're looking forward to having you back. Stay strong out there. But with me this week is Cameron Art. You might know him from his game development work on the vowelless word game Vowel, the compact card game Barnyard, the Keymaster Stonemeyer crossover expansion to Rolling Realms, the Cluckin' Good dice game Chicken, and most recently as the solo mode designer for the wildly successful Kickstarter game Harvest. But I know him as the guy that kicks my tail every week at board games. So how's it going, Cameron?
It's going pretty good. I do want to just bring up that long-winded Keymaster Stonemeyer crossover expansion to Rolling Realms, which in reality was a single card. I just want to point that out for anybody listening and confused about what that was. But it's going good.
Hey, well, designing cards is hard.
Designing cards is hard.
So designing one,
it wasn't that hard, but it was work, and I'm credited with it, so I'll take it.
Hey, your name is credited on a Stonemeyer game.
It is.
And what more could you ask for?
Not a lot.
Amen. There you go. So you're probably the best person that I know at board games. Meaning, like in our game group, I would say if we kept a rolling score, you'd probably be at the top.
Maddox is not very good. That's true.
Maddox. Maddox is great at board games, but Maddox has a tendency to want to go fast as possible, be as aggressive as possible.
Yeah, I let myself get stuck on my turn for 5-10 minutes, make you guys wait, but then I make the best decision and I win. So.
It's worth it. You break our spirits and then you win the game. So, this is the second week in a row that I've brought on a close friend of mine to talk about games. But, I can't help that I have friends that are wildly successful in the board game world.
Just Athens. It's a hub. It's a hub for board games. What can we say?
Athens, Georgia. That's what that's what I hear is that this is the place to be if you want to make games. And you don't live in Germany.
Yes, correct.
Perfect. So Taylor and I have been wanting to bring you on to discuss game design because you are a game designer and a game developer.
Yep.
Taylor's bummed he could not be here this week. Personally, I have a lot of questions. That's one of the reasons that we wanted to bring you on. Like, why is the red stitch a rare, but the Mufasa is common? That's confusing to me. And like, why
they're the same card? Yeah.
The same card.
They
different
are
rarities. Stuff. Why are there 6 colors? Why do I always lose to red purple? Some of these big questions that I want answered.
You're not playing a mean enough green deck is the answer to that, by the way. But just continue, yeah.
That's probably my problem. But I just think that the design perspective is interesting because we play this game and a lot of times we don't think about what went into it arriving at this point. What's the thought process behind some of the card choices? Because sometimes we see a card and we're like, this is a great card, or this is a bad card, and we think of it as like associated with this is a well-designed card, but that's not always the case. Sometimes bad cards were made that way on purpose. So some things like that. Really, I just wanted to get your perspective on Lorcana, and part of the reason is that you're the person that got me and Maddox into Lorcana in the first place.
I am, yeah. I was pretty excited about that, especially being somebody who's not into TCGs at all. Being like, hey, Mr. Magic Guy, let's get you into this TCG, and now you're hosting a podcast. So I take credit for this podcast. I just want to throw that out there to the world.
Don't worry,
it's because of me.
You're
welcome.
You'll get your cut. Yeah, you're also a huge Disney fan.
Right? I am. Yes, my wife and I are big Disney fans. I grew up on a lot of Disney animation. Love the Disney parks in particular. I could do a whole podcast talking about just design of Disney parks too. Yeah. I love so much about them.
Yeah. So it makes sense why you got into Lorcana. It makes sense why you try to get us into Lorcana. But before we really dive into the topics that we have, which is mainly a lot of questions that I have queued up for you, I want to pick your brain on some things. We have some news to share. First of all, Fortyborn has broken 1,000 downloads.
Woo!
Thank you. Yeah. So that's a big mark for us. So thank you all for your support of the podcast. This is the best way that you can support the podcast, by listening. We don't have, a Patreon or anything like that. Right now we're just growing and trying to grow as quick as we can. So listening, leaving us good reviews and ratings around places, that's the best way to support. So thank you so much. But even more importantly for the world of Lorcana, Gargoyles is getting a live action adaptation. So this is breaking news. It deserves its own episode, but Disney Plus has given the green light to a live action version of the greatest animation produced by Disney of all time, Gargoyles.
Okay.
No, be quiet.
Emperor's New Groove.
No, you had
wants to.
you
would like to enter the conversation, but okay.
I'll give you time to speak. Gary Dauberman is writing, producing, and showrunning, and he's working with Atomic Monster. It's the film company. They've worked together to make several horror movies like The Conjuring, Annabelle, The Nun, all of those really wonderful
Scream
family.
Disney, let me tell you.
It is a bit of a weird crossover, and honestly, I'm already nervous. I made it very clear last episode with Maddox that I don't like scary things on TV.
Yeah.
And James Dauberman wrote it.
It should hopefully just be spooky, I feel like,
Yeah, I think it could be cool. Like, I think a more, like, grown-up, scary version of Gargoyles could be cool.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
I'm glad you're excited.
Yeah. There. Don't worry. There will be news. This is slowly going to shift into a Gargoyles podcast.
It just talks about gargoyles all the time.
That's it. We're almost there already. So we talked a little bit about how you got us into Lorcana, but this is your first TCG, right? So
correct.
Why Disney IP is a dime a dozen these days in terms of board games? Why Lorcana? You've never played a TCG. What made you want to get into this one?
Yeah, so I would say, to your point, I think there's a lot that has been done with the Disney IP. I feel like in the last couple years, really, we've seen a lot more good stuff be done with the Disney IP. I think there's a lot of cash grabby kind of stuff that has been done with the Disney IP. That's just more the kind of mass markety Disney IP thrown onto something like an Uno or a Monopoly, or just throwing that IP onto a game that already exists. For me, it was 3-4 years ago, Ravensburger came out with Ravensburger came out with Disney Villainous, which I really, really loved and enjoyed. It felt like the first more modern foray into what can we do. The Disney IP is so dense and interesting and has all these fun characters with lots of fun backstories that people love. What can we do with that doesn't feel like it's just pasted on, but really feels like we're playing in the Disney world? So, excuse me.
You get choked up.
A little bit. I get real choked up. So Ravensburger kind of earned a lot of goodwill on that end from me with how well Villainous was handled and how much I love playing that game. So seeing when they announced Lorcana, it just felt like a no-brainer of a game that I would enjoy. With it not being, this is a game that's driven by the IP rather than a game that has had the IP thrust upon it.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's pretty, well, I was about to ask for some examples of stuff that go the other way, but let's not go there.
Yeah, I know we don't. I already kind of called out some things. It's fine.
We can be vague. Yeah, I know that you're a big Villainous fan. I've played a little bit and I've enjoyed it as well. Mm-hmm. It's fun to be the bad guy sometimes in games.
Lots of fun.
I'm still waiting for the villains deck to actually be competitive.
Relevant. Yeah, that would be great.
I'm just sitting on a 4 of the big Hades so I can
just waiting.
Pay for my kids' retirement. Pay for my kids' retirement. Whatever. So we're a couple months in. You've played some limited. You've played some constructed. What are your thoughts so far? How does it meet your expectations of what you expected, and how does it differ from what you expected?
So far, I think on a gameplay perspective wise, I've been even more pleasantly surprised than I thought I was going to be. Like, to your point, I've never played a TCG before. I know for people who have, the structure of this shouldn't feel like something too crazy groundbreaking. I mean, the structure of the gameplay is very, very familiar to TCG players. When I first read the rules, it seemed deceptively simple, which is kind of my favorite kind of rules for a game, is one where I read them and I go, well, that doesn't seem like it would be that interesting. And then you play it and you go, oh, that is really, really interesting. They're doing a whole lot with a whole little on the rules side of things. So on that side of things, I think it's exceeded my expectations of this is just a really clean system for them to play around with a lot of interesting interactions that can arise from such a clean system. On a product side of things, I think I'm very new to the TCG scene, so like getting accustomed to the pricing structure of TCGs and boosters, and like it's a much more expensive. It almost feels like it's not even in the board game world, just in terms of like me buying a board game, me picking up Villainous. Like, I know exactly what I'm getting there. There's a set cost at the outset that I'm paying up front versus this TCG feels like, man, oh man, this could get dangerous real quick and I could spend way too much money way quickly just with how it's structured. So I think that's been interesting to explore also. But on the game side of things, I'm really, really enjoying this first set and seeing what they've done with very little, with very simple core.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with all of that. I came from the Magic side, and I agree with a lot of what you just said. I'm really enjoying Lorcana, and you and I actually played Cube.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you made...
I made one.
So you were able to get access at Gen Con to a box.
Yes, I got a booster box at Gen Con and one of each of the starter decks.
Yeah,
what kicked me off.
You used those cards to make a cube, and then we drafted them, and then we ended up playing like Two-Headed Giant, which was pretty fun.
Yeah.
2-on-2. That's probably the most fun I've had playing.
That was a lot of fun.
Lorcana.
I want to see them come out with like more official rules, because it definitely got a little sketchy sometimes around how interaction should work, but teams is fun.
Yeah, 2-on-2 is a blast.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun. And then Cube is a limited format that we actually haven't talked about on this podcast yet, where Cube is, I mean, you know what it is, but I'm just explaining this for Taylor.
Yes, for Taylor. Yeah. Definitely not for me at all. Yeah.
So, Cube is where basically you make your own set, and then you draft it.
Yeah.
So you get a bunch of cards, and you randomly generate packs, and then you draft the packs, as you would if you were just opening packs at a store. So instead of drafting the first chapter, we're going to do 4 packs of the first chapter.
Yeah.
This is, you make a super overpowered set, or you can do like a theme, like adjust villains, like one day when we have thousands
when we
of
actually
cards.
have enough villains.
Yeah. It'll be a villain cube, or it'll be a popper cube. It's pretty popular in Magic, which is only commons and uncommons. Or vintage cube in Magic is extremely popular because it's just super, super, super powerful card over the decades of the years. It's like all of the most powerful cards smushed together into
all the good
a cube.
stuff. Yeah.
And then then you're playing
crazy decks.
Yeah. So cube is great, but I think let's dive into some design stuff. So up front, what is your experience as a designer and developer? I know I went on a little bit of a rant, but
I think for me, I got into game design in high school, kind of late high school. I started working on a party word game called Vowel, which is just a game where you're trying to guess words that have had their vowels taken out of them. Super simple concept. It was a lot of fun. I at that point kind of started getting turned on to the more modern hobby and realizing that Kickstarter was a thing that people use to get games in front of people and publish games. So I was like, I could totally do that. That doesn't seem that hard. So I threw it up on Kickstarter. It went well enough. It didn't go crazy, just to set some expectations. It went well enough that I was able to make the game, get it out in front of people, learned a lot about publishing and designing, and then was like, let's do this again. So I made a small little wallet game called Barnyard, which is just 24 cards in a little wallet, a little 2-player drafting game. And as I was kind of doing that, I had moved out here to Georgia and had met Maddox, and subsequently then you, as we started getting together games. And he obviously, as he was on last week, is the creative director, Keymaster, and they were kind of looking to expand their development output. And he felt like I had the right mind for development and design work, so they pulled me on. That was 2-3 years ago, and I had been working for them for the better part of probably a year on development work for 2-3 games that are now we can talk about.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, and so right now I'm working independently as a developer, working with several different companies on developing games. Just taking good ideas and making them better is really the goal there.
So that's what a developer does.
Yeah, I largely, on the development side of things, which is the larger chunk of what I do, I work with designers on games that they've already kind of come up with a core for, and then help them guide that core over the finish line. Oftentimes, designers are very, very good at getting a game like 75% of the way there, but that remaining 25% is almost just as much work as that original 75% was, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Sometimes designers need to get that game out of their own heads and get it into somebody else's head who can like see the vision for it and get it over the finish line to where it needs to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And you are great at that, as we've seen with some of the stuff that you've put out, and I'm pretty stoked for some of the stuff that will be coming out.
There's fun stuff in the pipeline, yeah.
That we cannot discuss. But I was going to ask, what are some of your core design principles? So you hear this phrase, or I've heard this phrase, questioned to designers.
Yep.
Do you have anything in mind for that, or
I've never kind of put together. No. I've never put together like a definitive list. I think I have general tendencies that I lean towards when I design and develop things. Development work is a lot of design work and vice versa. I know I tend to lean towards simplicity is king. Oftentimes, I think when you are facing an issue with a game not working the way you want it to, usually the way to fix it is to cut stuff and to remove things. I like coming in and cutting out all the fat and getting down to what is the core of what makes this game fun and exciting. Just let me do that. Don't distract me with all this other ridiculous, excessive stuff. It's part of the reason I appreciate Lorcana, and probably would appreciate a lot of the other TCGs now that I've played Lorcana, is this core simplicity of the gameplay. It's just like, here's what we want players to be able to do, and the tension we want to provide, just let them do that in whatever the simplest way possible is. So I know, for me, my tendencies often lean towards trim the fat, simple is king. If your rule book makes people want to hurl when they look at it, you're doing something wrong. Usually. That's not, that's very broad statements, but simplicity is king is usually what guides me a lot of the times. What's the core vision for this game? Execute on that core vision and don't get distracted in the weeds.
Yeah. So is that why Nemesis is one of your favorite games?
Yes. Absolutely.
So Nemesis is one of mine and Maddox's favorite games, and you like it. But...
No, I love Nemesis. Nemesis is a great time. I think Nemesis often surprises me because it does the opposite of what I think is good game design, but it still manages to be fun every time I play it. So
it breaks so many rules of game design.
Yeah,
but it works.
It works.
Like, there's player elimination.
Just usually people don't like. Yep.
Yeah, and there's it's pseudo co-op, right? Like it's co-op or competitive, and you don't know which. It's extremely difficult to win.
Yeah, and the rules complexity and overhead is just insanity.
But it's such
every time we play, we discover a rule we've been playing wrong. It's like what people think of when they think of your stereotypical hardcore board gamer. This is what they play. It's going to take them an hour and a half to explain the rules. This actually takes an hour and a half to explain the rules. But it's so fun.
Yeah, it's worth it.
It doesn't even matter because it's so much fun. So,
yeah, it's such a good game. What are some of your It's hard to say what are your favorite games, but
yeah, it is hard.
What games do you think, or what are a couple of games that line up maybe with some of your design principles? Not necessarily what's your favorite. But...
Interesting. That is an interesting question. I think I'm a big worker placement fan in the board game sphere of things. Viticulture being, I think, kind of the classical, one of the best worker placement games there is. So I think that's a good one to point to. I know Maddox mentioned Dune Imperium. I also love Dune Imperium. I don't know. It's interesting as a player. I don't know if all the games that I love playing necessarily align with all my design tendencies all the time. I think that's something I think about a lot. There's an interesting split between the games that I often work on the most aren't necessarily the types of games that I play the most.
Yeah.
But it's more just that's where my skill set lies in developing things, I think.
That makes sense. But what are some of your favorites? I'll rephrase it that way. What are some of your favorite games right now?
Okay.
Like tonight,
yeah.
if
Dune
me
Imperium's
and
definitely
Maddox are
up
sitting
there.
down to play,
Yeah.
and you get to pick,
Yeah.
what are we playing?
Dune Imperium's up there. I really love Tapestry. I will always play a good game of Tapestry. Let's see. Scythe is another classic that I feel like I will always, if people want to play it, I'm always going to play it. It's a great time. Love playing that game. Gotta say stuff that's not just Stonemaier, because that feels problematic, right?
Exclusively Stonemaier games.
Just exclusively Stonemaier.
And Dune Imperium.
Marvel United. I love Marvel United.
Oh,
I often
yeah.
forget about that one because it's just this. I've played that game so much at this point, so it's easy to get over. There's so much content for that game.
But that's a good
United's
example
another great time.
of, I think, your core principle of that game is so basic.
Yes, the super simple core rule set, and they're letting the tension and what's interesting in the game be derived from the characters and the cards in the game. A lot like what Lorcana does.
Yeah.
The core of that game is so simple, and you're getting all these interesting interactions spewing from just what cards do.
Yep. And the Marvel IP certainly helps.
The Marvel IP definitely helps.
Yes. So I wanted to ask you, a lot of times when people are talking about cards in a TCG, this is not unique to Lorcana.
Yep.
People will use the phrase like this card was poorly designed, or this limited format. What was design thinking with this limited format?
Yeah.
Or what was design thinking when this card was printed? For
Wish
example,
I could know what the designer was thinking here.
if a card has to get banned, for example, in Magic, people will typically blame design, and I think that's, there's some merit to that. But when people say this is a good or a bad designed card, what do you think that actually means? Do you this is your first TCG, so maybe it's hard to say, but if you want to extrapolate to games in general, what are some signs of good and bad design, and how could you maybe relate that to a trading card game?
Yeah. So there's a lot of big questions there. On the signs of good versus bad game design, I think a lot of people answer that question very differently or have a lot of different opinions on it. I think at the end of the day, your role as a designer is to create something that when people play it, want to play it again. I feel like that's a sign that you've done your job well. How do you do that? Usually by tension. I feel like tension in a game and tension and trade-offs, I feel like, are kind of the two, which kind of go hand in hand. What makes people play this game and go, oh, that's interesting, or this is an interesting choice that I have to make here? I think you can be confident that you have designed a part of your game well when a player struggles to make a decision about how to do that part of the game. Now, obviously, you don't want stuff that's so much of a struggle that people can't even figure out what to do on their turns. That's a whole nother can of worms. But I think cards, looking at TCGs and looking at just card games in general, a card is designed well when players have to try and figure out the best way to use it. I feel like that is what TCGs do, is say, here's this set of cards. We're challenging you with the task of figuring out what's your ideal deck. There's some restrictions around how you can build your decks. But what do you think is your best possible deck given this whole set of cards? So for you to then come back at the designer and say, hey, this is a badly designed card. Well, this is the whole point of what they're challenging you with, is here's this set of cards. Build your best deck from it. you're not going to use all the cards. You're going to use what you think is going to be the best combo that's going to win you the game. That inherently means that there are going to be cards that you think aren't as good as other cards. That's part of the whole point of the game, though. So I think it's easy to look at a card and go, I don't really like this card because it doesn't align with your playstyle or what you want in your deck. But then to extrapolate and say, this is just poorly designed or this is just a bad card. Maybe that's true sometimes, but a lot of the times it's just, maybe that's just not a card for you. You know, maybe that it doesn't fit into your archetype, doesn't fit into your playstyle, it doesn't fit into the cards you've already put in your deck. Maybe somebody else freaking loves that card and it works really, really well for them. And you're just, I think it's easy to get narrow-minded when you're just thinking about, this doesn't fit in with my deck, this doesn't fit in with how I play, so it's a bad card. So it's been designed bad. I think oftentimes it's not actually the case. Then again, that is the whole point of the structure of a TCG. And I know I'm talking more on the construction side, but it's the same in Limited too, right? Like that's the whole point is the designers are throwing cards into your hand and you're saying, hey, which one of these is going to be the best for me given this current situation? That inherently means certain cards are going to be worse for you given that certain situation. That's the whole point. So,
yeah, I think that within the context of Lorcana, I totally agree with everything that you just said. There's really, I think, in a TCG, 2 reasons to ban a card.
Okay.
It's too powerful.
Yep.
Which I don't think we have that problem in Lorcana at the moment.
No.
Or it generates an unfun player experience consistently. So in Magic, for example, I don't remember the exact name of the card, but there was a card somewhat recently, and by that I mean in the last few years, that lets you take extra turns.
Okay.
But it was very expensive. But the problem was, you could have a control deck built around that, and then you could just take 2, 3, 4 turns in a row, and your opponent's just sitting there for 15 minutes like, well, did you win yet?
Doesn't sound like fun.
So it wasn't even that the deck was that powerful, but the fact that it was even slightly competitive made the format unfun, because then you had something kind of like what we see, honestly, right now with the red-purple deck, where red-purple is basically a best-of-1. Like, if it's a mirror match, it's just a best-of-1 format in a best-of-3 format.
Yeah.
So it's not as bad. Like, I definitely don't think anything needs to be banned. That's not at all what I'm saying. But I do think that there will be a time when it happens that something needs to be banned. Now, when something is too powerful, personally, I don't think that is like a mistake on, air quotes, on design or development. But when there's a card that creates a terrible environment to play in, to me, that's when I start looking more at design and development. Yeah. Being like, how did this get through?
Yeah, I think that's a good call out. Like, I think it's very clear from this first set and from just the experience of the people that have worked on, the people working on this game have experience working on these kinds of games and have worked on games before. Obviously there will be decisions that maybe if you were designing the game, you would have decided differently. But, that's their choice as the designer of the game. I think you're hitting on something that is a very key aspect that is important to consider as a designer, which is at the end of the day, people play games to have fun.
What?
People play games to have fun. Did I need to repeat that? It felt like that was pretty clear.
I think maybe for some people it needs to be repeated.
Okay. At the end of the day, that's what games are for. So, like, when you're designing a card in TCG, is that card contributing, or is that card able to contribute to somebody having fun with that card? Or is it going to cause people to not have fun with it? Like, really, that should be the most important guiding light behind design decisions, is not just, is this balanced, is this whatever, but is this fun? Is this system fun? Is this card ability type fun? Like, is it fun for people to play with? And it's not going to be fun for everybody because people like to play different ways. But generally, like, are we creating something that people can have fun with? And then you go deeper from there and you get into, why do people have fun? Well, I have fun playing these kinds of games because of interesting trade-offs. Like, that's what I'm looking for when I play a game, is trade-offs and interesting choices that I'm being forced to make as a player, and trying to figure out what's the best choices I can make. That's fun for me. That's what I enjoy playing. Some people might just want to play a villain deck.
Yeah.
And they just love their characters and how they interact with each other. They should be able to have fun and do that and not have to, like, you're trying to accomplish please a whole lot of different player types. At the end of the day, your goal is for your game to be fun and to not have moments that are unfun. So whatever you can do to avoid that, like, that's the goal.
So why do I keep losing to red purple?
I'm
kidding.
That's another.
I just want to win. That's how I have
different
fun.
question. Well,
so this ties into something that we're gonna do a future episode on this probably, but Magic has this concept of psychographic profiles, where it's like they've basically isolated three different types of players, and when they're building a set, they try to keep the different types of players in mind.
Yeah.
And I think that what's hard for a lot of people is to realize that not everybody views the world the same way that you do. Not everybody enjoys the same thing that you do. And us as gamers should understand this more than anyone. I mean, we're all dorks. Like, TCGs aren't mainstream because it's not appealing to a lot of people.
Yeah.
But to us, it is. And so then for me to say, why would Work Together exist? It's a terrible card. Well, it is a bad card to me because I want to win when I play. But to somebody that wants to make a Kronk deck...
Yeah. That's a
awesome.
good point. I think that's something we get lost in as gamers too, is this desire to win all the time. And like, that's fine and it's fun to win, and I get that. But exactly to your point, like, people play games for different reasons, and people should be able to have fun however they want to play. Just because you have the most fun trying to make the best possible deck doesn't mean everybody thinks that way.
Yeah.
You can look at a card and say, well, this is bad and you shouldn't ever include it. There's no great deck with this card in it. Okay, but maybe somebody else is really having fun playing with that card because they just like what it does and it's fun to play that way. Let them play that way. Like, it doesn't mean that card is bad. It maybe means it's bad if you're trying to create the best deck ever. But if you're trying to create the best deck ever, that's 60 cards out of 204 possible. Realistically, you're using duplicates. Like, we're talking about, you're looking at the top 30 cards out of 200. You're saying all the rest of those cards are badly designed? No, that's not the case.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's important to think about, how are you defining fun as a player? How's the designer defining fun with the types of players they're trying to reach? And Lorcana in particular is trying to reach a wider audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So the good and bad isn't even often a useful term.
Yeah, now that we're talking about it more, you're right. Yes,
Yeah.
it's kind of hard to say, is this a good card? Or if you want to talk about creating the best possible decks you could win, yes, then we can talk about whether cards are good or bad in certain circumstances. But when we're just talking about, like, the design theory around whether or not this is a fun game to play and this is a good card that they included in the set or not, it's way more complicated than that. Yeah. You can't just say, well, this isn't the best possible card, so it shouldn't have been in the set. It's bad. No, like, that's not all they're looking for when they include cards. So
yeah. Once again, I'll point us to a very famous in the Magic scene article by Mark Rosewater called "When Cards Go Bad." He discusses. We should probably read it and have you
probably should
have you come back on to talk through it, because he presents reasons for why bad cards, quote unquote bad cards, need to exist in each set of Magic, and why they also need to exist in each set.
Because they're not bad. That's the plot twist, is what I just kind of came to. I feel like, I hope you can hear it in my voice. Yeah. That people can hear that I've just come upon this realization that it's because they're not, you're defining good and bad one way. It's just bad. Yeah. Bad to you is not bad to me. Yeah. And at the end of the day, people should just be able to do what they want when they're playing card games and have a good time. And as long as you're having fun and they're having fun, who cares? Good. Yeah. And if all you care about is winning, well, you know what? You're probably going to beat those players. So who cares? Like, and if someone else having fun means that you're not having fun, maybe we need to have a bigger conversation. Yeah. There's a problem. There's a problem around why you're doing this in the first place. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. But I think that and this is coming from someone that is a Spike player myself. Mm-hmm. Spike is like the profile. It's like, I just want to win. That type of person. I fall into that category, and so I slip into this mindset a lot. I feel you. I like getting deep in the strategy and how can I be as efficient as possible. Yeah.
I want to win.
I enjoy that. I have fun with it. Yeah.
So let's move on to some. We've talked maybe at a high level about Lorcana and about design, but like maybe some more specific questions.
Yeah.
So maybe we could start off with the one that I mentioned up front, which is, I think that I've had people explain this to me.
Yeah.
And my brain understands the answer to this question, but my heart does not.
Mm-hmm.
Why is the red Stitch a rare, but the blue's is it Mufasa?
Mufasa.
Is the same exact stats, the same
card.
cost,
Yep.
same card,
Both inkable, exact same stats.
Yeah. Why is it common? Like, why are they different rarities?
People don't line up for Mufasa merch. They line up for Stitch merch. That's really the answer.
No. You think so?
No. But it's a fun answer.
Well, that's just because you love Stitch.
Yeah. I mean, everybody loves Stitch, though.
Yeah,
Mufasa's not coming up on a list of iconic Disney characters. Maybe Simba is, but Mufasa's not on it. Like, if you're talking about most iconic of all time, Stitch is probably going to make it on that list. I don't know.
The disrespect of Mufasa.
That's what happens when you die like 20 minutes in the
Yeah.
movie. Spoilers.
Spoiler.
Yeah,
Come
by
on,
the way,
man.
if you haven't seen
Jeez.
one of the most iconic Disney movies of all time. But, no, I think as people can probably surmise, it comes down to color. They're in two different colors, red and blue. It's red and blue.
Mm-hmm.
Where Mufasa in the blue is a common card versus Stitch in the red is a rare card. I've looked at them too because I had the same question. I think there are a couple other cards around that have a similar story, very close or exactly the same on stats. I think there's two that are like the same, but one is inkable and one is not. And I was like,
yeah.
It's largely due to the archetype of that play color. So for blue is largely focused around ramping up. Blue's going to have a lot more of those high cost cards. It's like a 6 cost, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be easier for blue to get to that high cost cards. It's like there's a lot of things you could dive into. Another thing that I've seen people point out is that really the difference between common and rare doesn't matter all that much. Especially like when we're talking about gameplay wise. Like, it doesn't have an impact on gameplay. It has an impact on chances of you pulling it out of a pack, right? But, like, so I think it could be for any number of reasons. I think it's largely due to what they've established as, here's the archetype for red, and we don't want too many 3 lore gainers in red, or whatever it's going to be. So we need Stitch is going to be a little bit rarer, because 3 lore gainers are not as prevalent in red, right?
Yeah.
It's probably something along those lines.
That makes sense.
Or it's because people like Stitch more. I mean, I feel like that's
That's fair.
also... Because, again, it has no impact on gameplay at all. Like, the rarity of a card does not impact actual play with the card.
Just how much we have to pay to play with it.
It's just how much you have to pay to get it. People like Stitch. This is a sweet Stitch. Alien Abomination, I mean...
Yeah. And also, something that I was thinking about is if you look at the red 6 cost slot, it he has slightly less competition than in the blue. Like, in the
there's
blue,
a lot of blue 6s.
Robin Hood, and this Scar, the 6 cost Scars,
He's good.
it shocked me and how good he actually is. I really wrote him off at first.
Yeah.
So compare
Just
him
like
to the
immediately
other.
kill something.
Yeah, compare
something
him to the
huge.
other 6 cost slots, and he's not as good in my opinion. Whereas if you compare the Stitch to the other 6 cost red slots, he's
Exactly. Yeah.
the best. I don't know.
I think arguably the best.
Tigger's evasive, but
Tigger's evasive.
Yeah.
Rapunzel's okay, but uninkable, you know.
no. She's
But yes,
bad.
so again, it's that card archetype, right? Like, just looking at this, we've got it up on the screen here. Like, you could ask the question of, why are there 5 6-cost cards in blue and only 4 in red, right?
There's just 4 in blue. This is a duplicate, and this is from the other one. Sorry.
Okay. Now I feel foolish.
We'll just cut it out.
We'll cut it. Cut.
Cut.
Cut that part right there.
Okay, well, so I was gonna ask about in yellow. There's the 2 cost Simba with bodyguard, and then there's the 2 cost Minnie Mouse, that is a 2/3 without bodyguard. It just seems weird to me that they're in the same color and the same exact rarity. Like, to me, it seems weird that Simba is a common as opposed to an uncommon. And before you answer, or we don't even have to talk about it because you kind of just addressed like the ideas, but like, the rarity does matter a lot more in limited than it does in
Does
because for us we're going to see a lot more commons and uncommons in limited,
true.
so we care about these cards a lot. So for us, we're going to see Mufasa, the blue Mufasa, a lot, and we're not going to see the red.
And I mean,
Stitch
thinking about those archetypes, right? Of blue being a deck that wants to ramp up to higher cost cards. Like, it makes sense that it would be easier to get higher cost blue cards because blue wants to ramp higher anyways, versus red isn't going to ramp as well. So you don't need to get the high cost reds as often because it might not play into strategies with red cards as often. Another thing I forgot to mention that I just popped in my head here that is worth considering is things like character tags. Like, I don't know what tags are on Stitch or on Mufasa or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Of, like, hero, right? Or alien versus... Like, that could be something... We don't know their future plans for cards. So that could be another thing that they have taken into consideration. Or, like, there are Stitches that shift, right?
Yeah.
That could be a consideration.
Yeah.
Like, we don't know what they're putting as a consideration for rarities. I don't think gameplay-wise it's impacting the rarity that much. I think it's probably just the archetype of the color where they're like, yeah, we'll make it a little rarer because reds doesn't need 6s as much. I think that's probably the most of it. But, I mean, who knows, right? Like, it could be that there's a shift Stitch. That could be a role that is playing a role in rarity, right?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. So another thing that I have a question about is coming from Magic, there's 5 colors. I mean, technically, if you want to talk about colorless or whatever they did with, like, the weird set where they had whatever. We won't go in there. There's 5 colors in Magic. Lorcana has 6 colors.
Yeah.
Magic, each set usually has about 400 cards. Lorcana, each set usually has about 200 cards. So there's more colors.
6, instead of...
Split. So there's less cards split across more colors. So from a design space, could you explain to me why you think that might be? Because I know that restrictions typically often, like, almost make it not easier, but restrictions lead to really good creative design solutions. Do you think something like that could be going on here? Like, why do you think that they have 6 colors?
Yeah, I think it's largely built around the constructed scene. As of right now, obviously, color doesn't really play a role in limited, which is fine. And that's not an issue. Doesn't really impact the game at all. I think, but it's largely based around this restriction of 2 colors in a constructed deck. That's what they came up with. That's what they ran with. I think it's a cool restriction to kind of guide deck building. That's another thing I really, really like about this game is I think it would be much more intimidating to me as a new player, as somebody new to TCGs, if it was just, here's 204 cards, build whatever deck you want out of all of them. That sounds incredibly hard for me to want to get into as somebody who's never played a TCG before. Versus this, no, you're going to be building a deck, but really you're only pulling from
68.
What is it? Yeah, so it's 68. There's 34 in each color. 68 total cards. Like, and you're building a 60 card deck. Obviously, you're going to use duplicates, but just saying those numbers to somebody up front, that sounds a lot less intimidating.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think 6 was either... It's probably a little bit of both. It's probably hey, here's all the archetypes we thought of what we could do for these colors. And that turned out to be around 6. Or it's, we want to have, from a product perspective, we want to onboard people with starter decks. We have 5 colors. You can't, like, evenly distribute 5 between starter decks. If you only have 4, maybe 4 is not enough. Like, 4 feels like it wouldn't be enough colors to really differentiate between, like, archetypes of a color. So I think 6 just feels like this kind of natural resting place where they've set out with this whole, a color is going to have an archetype, and we want players to use 2 colors in a deck. 6 feels like a good amount of colors to play around with on the archetype perspective and on the building decks perspective.
Yeah, because the cynical part of me is like, oh, they just didn't want to do 5 so they could be different from Magic. But I'm sure that they have...
I mean, that also could be part of it. I mean, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, one day when we have Ryan Miller out here, we'll ask him. But I I think I was also gonna ask him. I was gonna ask you. I have a lot of questions, but we are a little short on time. So I was gonna ask from like a design perspective. I keep saying that. We know why you're on the show.
Yeah.
In your opinion, what do you think is the most interesting keyword? And the keyword, just for Taylor at home, can you remind him what a keyword
So keywords are like traits on cards that will exist across lots of cards. So things like bodyguard, usually they're still explained in full text on the card. So, but it's a nice quick hand for people who are familiar with the game to just say this card has bodyguard rather than having to read out what bodyguard is every single time somebody asks, what does that card have over there? If you can just say, is bodyguard, this is an easy, quick reference for people who know those kind of core abilities that show up on a lot of cards.
Yeah.
I came prepared. I've ranked the keywords in a tier list from S, because that's what tier list starts with, I guess, all the way down to F.
Wait,
never understood that. What? So for people who are unfamiliar with tier lists somehow, they go from the worst, which is F, and then D, C, B, A, and then S. S tier being the best. I'm not really sure why. Feels like we could have done A through F and just put E in there, but whatever.
No, that would have made too much sense.
Yeah.
But what's your, when you say best, like what do you mean? Like your favorite, or which one do you think is the
I'm doing
strongest?
this from a perspective of a little bit of both. I think strongest is hard to say, like, this is the strongest keyword, because it's going to depend on the card it's on. Yeah. Like, you can have a really good keyword, like, I think, as we'll get into, I think evasive is great. Evasive could be on, like, a crap card, though, and then maybe it's not so great.
Yeah.
So, I think, generally, there are certain keywords that I feel like are a little bit more exciting, or a little stronger, or maybe even just a little more fun. That's kind of how I've ranked them.
Okay, well, let's hear what you got.
We're going to start with F.
So this is not limited focused.
No, and I don't know that it applies. I feel like it applies to both. Like,
okay.
I think the keywords kind of, they transcend formats.
Oh, wow, okay. we'll see if
I don't think there's a certain keyword that's better in one format or the other, but maybe I'm wrong. We'll start with F, which I think if you've played Lorcana, you should know. What is the F tier one? It's Singer. Singer is, I feel like, the keyword that I wanted to be excited for that just isn't it. And I think it will be eventually. I think it's a lack of lots of songs in the game and lots of cards with Singer. I think there's only like 2 cards that even have Singer on it in the first set anyway. There's not a lot.
Yeah.
There's a couple, but there's not a lot. That one is like you can sing a song that's even more expensive than what the cost of the card was in the first place.
Yeah, I'm on board, especially in limited, because you're gonna have even less good songs.
Even less songs.
Okay, so far I'm tracking.
Yeah.
And I will point out though that to me, from a design perspective, Singer's the coolest thing.
I think it's great. I love songs. I think it's a super cool design. I think we haven't gotten to see it be as relevant as they want it to be because of the number of cards in the game. I think when there's a lot more songs in the game, singing is going to get a lot more interesting.
Okay, I'm picking up what you're putting down. What's next?
All right, D, we got Reckless. I don't dislike Reckless. I think it's a lot more conditional. Reckless is you have to challenge every turn if you can, and they can't quest. They don't get you any lore. Usually Reckless characters, though, have then a lot of extra strength for doing lots of damaging and big punching. That's fine. In a game where the goal is to get the most lore, though, characters that don't get you lore ultimately aren't that great. I just think in general. I think it's fine. I think it has its place. I definitely use Reckless characters. I've got a red-blue deck that has Reckless characters in it because they work well in there. Like, I think the stats on those cards are usually inflated, so it can be great for knocking people out. But just generally not the most exciting.
And it's fun to give your opponents cards Reckless.
Yes, it is fun to give other people Reckless. I don't feel like we have a lot of ways to do that right now, but I feel like we'll probably get more. Yeah, that'll make it a little more fun.
Okay, what's the C slot?
C's, we've got 2 in the C slot. I went with Challenger, which is usually you're getting extra strength if you are the attacker. They're fine. Again, I feel like they can be good depending on the card it's on. More often than not, though, it just feels like, okay, but now I'm leaving myself open to be walloped, and I don't do any strength back as the defender. They're fine.
Use Zeus.
C's are fine. You're gonna use them. Zeus is a little different. Zeus has got rush on him.
That's true.
That improves Challenger quite a bit. The other one I got in C is support, which is like when you quest with a character, you get to add their strength to somebody else so that they can go hit somebody for stronger. I think it's like a slightly better than like what Reckless is doing, which is encouraging you to attack people. But it's just not that exciting, which is why it's in C. Moving up to B, I've got Rush, which I love Rush. I think Rush is a great time. Anytime you can surprise attack somebody when they don't see it coming. I've got nothing on the board, so they think they're safe by exhausting something, and then I just rush a Rafiki into them. It's so much fun. I love Rush. I think it's a great time. Again, the core of this game, of winning this game, is getting lore, not fighting. So that's probably why it's a B and not an A for me. It's just like, but at the end of the day, this is still just helping fighting and not helping me get lore. So it's not as high as it could be, despite me thinking Rush is a lot of fun. I think it's a really cool mechanic. Okay. And then Ward, which is can't be chosen for certain effects. It's just a nice defensive ability to have, especially when you're coming up against like gray cards or something. It's solid, and won't bat my eye at Ward. It's okay. It's fine. It's good times.
Okay. You're losing me now.
I'm losing you. You love Ward.
No, we're starting
Ward.
to disagree.
You hate it. You hate it. Okay. Moving up to A
I'm
tier.
thinking about things from the limited side, but keep going.
Gotcha. Ward is even less useful in limited. Now I'm seeing the ones that are definitely Singer, definitely less useful in limited. Sardi not useful. Ward, also, yes, I can see that being not very helpful in limited.
There's just not that much.
It's so conditional. Yeah, so conditional. A tier, evasive. It's got to be up there. Amen. It's almost S tier for me. Evasive is so good. I feel like it's definitely S tier, even maybe in limited.
It is
so hard to deal with. It's just so good. Anytime you have a character out there that's gaining lore and your opponent can't touch them, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Even if you're exhausted or exerted, yeah, it's great. Bodyguard is my other A tier. Just so useful to protect your stuff. Similar to evasive, it's protecting your good stuff. Like, that's what you want it to be doing. And when Bodyguard does its job well, you're questing with something big, and they're having to fight your puny little Simba while your, big old Aladdin's going to town. Like, it's so good. S tier, I've got some surprise keywords here that maybe you wouldn't consider are keywords. I'm calling shift a keyword. It's a keyword.
Yeah, it's a keyword.
I love shift. I think the shifting in the Floodborns is so exciting. I have a lot of fun. Obviously, I think shifting is going to be a lot less relevant in limited. But it's so much fun and constructed. It's going to be so much more fun in the next set when we have a million more shift cards that seem to be coming.
Oh, yeah.
And then the newest keyword that we don't even have in play yet, which is resist, which is reducing the amount of damage a character takes anytime they take damage. Resist seems broken to me. Not going to lie. I'm sure it's because I haven't played it, because that's how TCGs work, is you see new cards and you go, well, that seems broken, and then you use it and it's like, okay, it's not that great. But right now, resist seems like super, super strong. The ability to reduce damage and stay alive without you having to do anything to do that, it's just an innate part of the card, just feels so, so strong. I will be very excited to play with resist cards whenever they show up.
Yeah.
November, hopefully, sounds like.
I'm looking forward to playing them, and I'm not looking forward to playing against them.
Exactly, and that feels like the sign of a good keyword that's doing its job.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I would agree with those. If we're talking about in limited, ranking them based on their utility. Yeah, I could see a couple
going down for sure.
Shift would absolutely go down.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be S.
Yeah.
I think the only S tier, it would be evasive. And then I would probably have bodyguard, resist, and rush at the A tier.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
And then B tier, I would have challenger, support. I don't remember what I have. haven't said. But at the D and F, I don't know exactly where, but I would put Singer, Reckless, Ward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shift is probably going down.
Yeah, Shift is going to be at the highest to C. Probably around the D area.
It's just not going to be useful and limited for the most part. Maybe next set when we have all these possible Shift cards, but certainly right now it's not. It's just probably not happening.
Yeah, I'm excited about all of the stuff that we're seeing with Shift and with Madam Mim and Merlin.
Oh yeah.
The different forms.
They look like a lot of fun.
And I would love to see like some sort of item, like Merlin's book that like gives all of your Merlin cards like shift 2 or something like that, so that you can like be playing them on top of each other and bouncing like a whole stack of them at once. Something like that would be cool, but we'll see what they do with it.
Shifting, there's just so much potential though. There's so much fun. And also like I feel like the other strength of shifting is it's the only way right now, really the only way aside from like some rush and stuff, but like to play a character and quest with it the turn you played it. Shifting's the only way to do that. And it's so, because it's the only way to do it, it feels so strong when you do it.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of fun.
When you shift Stitch and they didn't think about it, and now you can get a 20 lore and they didn't think that you could.
Or the shift Aladdin. I'm a big fan of the shift Aladdin, and then knock somebody out and you gain 2 and they lose 2.
Yeah.
They thought they were doing great, and now there's this 4 lore swing out of nowhere.
Maybe that's why I keep losing to red purple.
Aladdin is why.
It's just Aladdin. Okay, well, I think that this might be a good place to wrap up this episode.
Yeah, there's a lot of kind of meandering random questions, but I hope we answered some fun ones.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to pick your brain a little bit about it. I know that, I have thoughts on design, but I've never done it professionally. And I really wanted to hear from you as somebody that this is your first trading card game. You love Disney. You're enjoying Lorcana so far. And I think you had some cool stuff to say, and I'm happy that we did this.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.